Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We are broadcasting live from Park City, Utah, North Carolina, Denver, Chicago, New Jersey, and California. Did I get all that right, guys? Pretty close?
Yes. Yeah.
So super happy to have you with us today. I'm going to big shout out and say that this is all Keara's fault. We've known each other for over 10 years. Keara has been co-founder, yes, of the company. And we've been chatting for quite some time. And I'm super excited to have the team on board today. And again, thank you, a big thank you to Keara for allowing me and the community to hear about what you're doing at Novel. You're gonna tell us what that means, right?
Absolutely.
135K. Just so everybody knows, we can't hear or see you, but we know you're there. We encourage you to ask questions through the chat box in the Q&A. We have a lot of people coming on today, so we ask you to post them as they come to mind so we can get to as many as possible. As you may have noted in the invitation, we are talking today in what we call the Family Office Insights Luminary series, which is more or less a fireside chat to chat about what's going on with the folks and the thought leaders of this company. And then we're going to be doing a pitch webinar in the next week, so we can talk more in depth about the financial aspects of investing in the company. Just to be super clear, we're going to be talking about the company today, so you understand, and the principles of the company. And our intent is to raise money for this company. And as you all know, we don't have any skin in the game from a broker dealer or economic perspective. We're just happy to bring this sort of opportunity to the community. So please feel free to not only your questions in the Q&A, but after you hear the presentation today in our chat, please also feel free that if there's others that you know that would find this interesting from an investment perspective, you're welcome to have them either look at the recording, and we'll be putting you direct in touch with the company, so you feel free to communicate them, and we totally stay out of the way in that regard, so feel free to do so. We should be spending about an hour with you today, and super grateful for Family Office Insights community and how engaged you've been as always. So welcome again. Thank you. Keara, take it away.
Thank you. And thank you, Family Office community, for taking time out of your day to hear what my team and I are trying to accomplish in the world of biotech. Geez, Arthur, time flies when you say we've known each other, 10 plus years. I feel like it was just, yesterday I started GSK. I had to check my LinkedIn. I actually started at SmithKline back in 2005. So wow, time flies when you're having fun. So since then, it's over 15 years entrepreneurial experience in the health and technology sector. I've had multiple roles, C-level executive, advisory seats in a lot of companies that were in growth phases. Previously, I was president of Spartina Biotech, right? That was a small molecule company, traditional biotech, where you're reaching milestones, raising capital. And, after meeting Afshin and Dr. Niazi, which we'll get into that exciting story shortly, I serve as the CEO of Novel 351K, responsible for setting vision, strategy, fundraising activities, which brings us to this lovely WebEx, development, and then we'll get into manufacturing and commercialization and where we see us fitting into the market. Our team is absolutely 100% so passionate about driving innovation and helping patients globally have access, to these life-changing biological drugs. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Who's next?
Niazi, would you like to go?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a delight to be speaking to you on a subject which is so close to our heart. I've been teaching all my life, but when the biological drugs came in, and biological drugs means the drugs made by a biological process, as opposed to chemical drugs, And this is not a very old, I think it was the mid-70s that the biological drugs became possible. And now suddenly, we had the opportunity to treat hundreds and thousands of diseases that we had no control over. So I switched over my focus on creating these biotechnology-based biological drugs. And I had the privilege of setting up the first US company to make the copies of original biologics. Biologics take a lot of money to get approved. You're looking at a couple billion to begin with. So the price is very high. So when the patents expire, okay, we have an opportunity to make copies of them, but that too is not as easy as making a chemical copies. So my entire life I've been involved in making what we call biosimilars, which have by definition mean there is no clinically meaningful difference with the reference product. We worked on technology. I secured several approvals from FDA. And I reached out to Afshin and Keara. I said, this is about time. Now that the regulatory, which is the main hurdle, and that's what it takes a lot of money and time. I've been very fortunate to be involved from day one. Day one means that when the Affordable Health Care Act, I worked with Mr. Barack Obama, and I continue to work with senators and White House to change the regulatory platform to make these products more affordable without risking their safety or efficacy development. So now we have a model which I think is more appropriate for expanding. No matter how big you are, once you add a few products, okay, you are saturated with your supply line and supply chain and manpower. So our model is so we should be able to add as many products as we can come up with. And I think this is going to work out much better than any other model so far. And I'm very enthused about being able to provide a novel way of taking this product to market. So that's a little story about me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I can go next. Thank you, Dr. Niazi. And by the way, I do have to tell you that Dr. Niazi's resume and publication is probably will take a good hour for us to review it. So Dr. Niazi, again, thank you. And I think hopefully throughout this presentation, we're going to dig more into, again, how Dr. Niazi has brought all of us together and really for this mission and vision that we have for Novel. I'm Afshin Safavi. I do have to tell you, there are multiple people on the call right now. It seems like with the name Afshin Safavi because I forwarded the invite to them. And so they're using the same Zoom that I'm using. So that's why you see multiple Afshin Safavis on the call. I'm a pharmaceutical scientist by training, both bachelor and PhD and postdoc in biochemistry. I've worked for various small, medium, and large biotech pharma, including GlaxoSmithKline, Bayer, Grifols, and a few other ones. For me, my entire life, I've been working with biologicals, and I've been mostly involved with the CROs and CDMOs. So these are contract research organizations that actually do a lot of the safety and efficacy work for the big pharmas as they get outsourced. I have built companies from scratch and work with some amazing individuals, much smarter than me, much more experienced. I would say that's the one thing that I'm good at, bringing the best of the best together. And I have built companies with $250,000 of credit card and home equity, which today I think the last exit we had 14 years or after 14 years was in excess of $3 billion. So I've had multiple exits. A lot of them have been somewhere about 7x to 200x return on investment, which I consider myself one of the luckiest people in biotech. And again, I attribute that to just being able to surround myself with some just amazing people. With that, I want to actually introduce you to one of the amazing people that I've known for probably about 8-9 years now. Nick Marasco. Nick is one of our advisors at Novel, but he's actually the guy that he put a team together in my previous company and took it was a $500 million company, and he took it to excess of $3 billion in a matter of, I think, less than 7 or 8 years. So aside from making a lot of people rich, he also helped us put some amazing drugs in the market. So Nick, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Afshin. So Dominic Marasco. Although I'm a clinical pharmacist by education, I've spent 25 years in life sciences, primarily on the sponsor side of the business and service side as well. My background ranges from clinical development through commercialization, but specific to this conversation, I've been involved with biosimilars almost 15 years. However, I don't have the notoriety that Dr. Niazi has. Quite frankly, my team and I built the biosimilars business unit for Novartis back in around the 2009 timeframe under the Sandoz umbrella. And then later I went on to build the Amgen biosimilars business unit, leading global commercial for Amgen biosimilars. Look, I joined as an advisor, the Novel 351K, primarily because it's a mission that I believe in. But more importantly, you're not going to find an individual that has a greater background in biosimilars than Dr. Niazi from a policy and a development perspective. He's been leading the charge long before they were ever called biosimilars, long before there was a biosimilar pathway. So I'm excited. I would encourage everyone to ask the questions that are important to you today, whether it's from utilization or investment perspective, because in my opinion, and not knowing him personally, in my opinion, there's no better person than Dr. Niazi on the phone to provide that advisory. So I'll hand it back to you, Afshin or Keara, and we can jump into it.
Thank you. Actually, let's hand it back to Arthur. Arthur, let's get with the questions and discussion.
So I first want to say that after hearing all this, I'm going to turn off my screen because I haven't done anything in 63 years compared to you guys. Let's crystallize for the group and define as best we can biosimilars, just so we're all on the same page. Can we do that?
I think Arthur, the best person from our group is the person who actually coined the term biosimilar. So Dr. Niazi, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I think this is a very, very significant question, because let me give you an example and then it will tell you a better story. Until about mid-70s or 80s, the only way you can treat, or not treat, but ameliorate some of the cancer is by giving a poison. Chemotherapy is simply, you want to kill everything and hoping the cells that multiply faster will kill more, all right? The tables have been turned. Instead of killing everything, okay, now we have antibodies which look at the only cancer cells as the rogue cells, and they just simply remove them. Today, as you and I speak, we have a complete treatment for cancer. There is no doubt in anybody's mind. This is how significant these biological drugs are. But somebody else had asked the question, it takes 10 or 12 years and a couple billion to make a new biological product. Now, if that is the case, then it's not expected that they will be selling them cheaply. Also, in the US, they get 12 years of exclusivity, regardless of the patent protection, okay? So for 12 years, okay, these drugs are going to be very expensive because they have to amortize their $2 billion expense, okay? But once they get out, okay, I think we have an opportunity to make exactly same molecule as the innovator product. And FDA, when FDA tells you that we are approving a biosimilar, it comes with a guarantee which reads as follows: there is no clinically meaningful difference with reference product. So you can use it instead of it, and the cost can be substantially low or lower than the reference product. So biosimilars are a choice to make them affordable, accessible for diseases which are so critical. Imagine if we can remove breast cancer altogether. We are almost there. All we have to do is make sure we can bring these drugs to everyone who needs it.
Exactly. If I may add something else quickly, Arthur, because I know, again, we have audience that are pros in biotech and pharma. There are some that maybe took a biology in high school. And so I want to make sure people understand this. Look, guys, the generic drugs that we're used to, the aspirin, the Viagra, I want you to think about these as if you basically think about a bicycle, right? There may be 20 components that you basically make a generic drugs, right? A bicycle. What we're dealing with here are biosimilar, the biologics. These are the generic form of large molecule biologics. And what we're dealing with is a jumbo jet. So imagine what it takes, the level of knowledge, the complexity, the quality controls you need to put in place, the system processes, the manufacturing of making a bicycle versus a jumbo jet. And that's a difference that, between generic and the biosimilars. And again, that's why you don't see too many people, actually everybody entering into the biosimilar world. It is difficult. You need to have the experience, expertise, and the right team. I want to hand it back to you, Arthur. Go ahead, please.
That's where I was headed. So for the benefit of the group, a generic is just taking something off of patent, which is the similar composition. I'm going to get it wrong, but the difference between the generic and the biosimilar is that you're treating a different disease with it.
No, Arthur, let me just, so with the generic, these are chemicals you add together. To make aspirin, few components you add together. To make Viagra, it's a chemically driven product, right? And it's identical because these are chemically driven. But what Dr. Niazi has done with the biosimilars and the rest of the industry is that with biologics, you have actually live cells that produce and make the medicine, okay? And therefore, they're never, ever, they're identical. They are similar. And that's why they're called biosimilar. And again, Dr. Niazi, you can talk about the history, how the biogeneric, and you talk to FDA made it biosimilar. So go ahead, please, Dr. Niazi.
Yeah, I think, again, there was a question, so let me handle that, okay, about clinical trials. So I have 3 products approved by FDA, and we did no clinical trials in patients. As I mentioned earlier, the biggest hurdle and the biggest cost comes in planning. So you don't have to go into extensive patient testing. So FDA is using a new term, it's called clinical efficacy in healthy subjects. 4 weeks ago, FDA published a paper saying no clinical trials for any biosimilar that has a pharmacodynamic endpoint, whether it relates to response or not. So we are done for a good number of other, for the biologics. Now we're coming closer to antibodies and others. And I have published extensively on this one, and I have written a book on it, is that the clinical efficacy testing is not as sensitive as analytics or clinical pharmacology. Is it going to end tomorrow? Probably not. Okay. But certainly the focus will change significantly. So our strength in the group is we have the regulatory strength. So yes, if we have to do a full clinical trial, it's going to cost, but we can also reduce the trial by giving enough argument to FDA that we don't need to do this. And for a good number of molecules, there's no need for any trial. Okay, FDA has come out very clearly, said no need for it unless there is a issue with the product. Okay.
Is it fair to say that the clinical trials and the efficacy, the clinical trials are to determine the side effects and make sure it's not dangerous? And since they've already been approved for use, existing use, then that could compress the time for their use for other conditions?
Yeah, first of all, a biosimilar must have same conditions or indications, same dosing, same route of administration. Those are requirements. Okay. Now, once we do, first of all, the biggest part of the testing, which has made a lot of sense, is analytical assessment. If I can show to you, like Afshin was saying, it's not a fixed structure like a chemical molecule. So there's no chemical equivalent. But if I can show that my product is just as variable as the reference product, then I've established a similarity part of it. Then it goes to testing in healthy subjects. And that is where the biggest value comes, okay, knowing all side effects. So what are the side effects? The only side effect that you can think of is immunogenicity. Okay. I mean, we have millions of antibodies in our body. Okay. So all they can do is act as an antigen. And those things are tested in healthy subjects first, okay, because they are more susceptible to producing it than patients who may have compromised immune system, okay. So by the time you get done with your clinical pharmacology, you have established the side effects are same or as good or as bad, and the dose response is same, and the molecule exactly resembles the one that is in the reference product.
Do you have to wait for the reference product to come off a patent to be able to do this?
To develop it, no. To market it, yes.
Okay.
So
So you can jumpstart it a couple years before.
Yeah,
it's coming
exactly.
off.
There's no, unless you go commercialize it, okay, the patent doesn't apply.
Got it. Please.
Nick, go ahead.
yeah, Arthur. So I'll also answer if Dr. Niazi doesn't mind. I'll jump in and make a comment, as well as address some of Dr. Campbell's comments that are in the question box at the same time. So
Sure.
what's important about biosimilarity, one is in development and the other is marketability. And so by the time a biosimilar makes it to the market, and there's several on the market currently, Humira, biosimilar, Herceptin, Avastin, Remicade, many others, almost many of which Dr. Niazi has been a driver for. But when they get to the market, there's an assumption by a prescriber or practitioner that the drug will act in the same manner that the reference product does, right? So a biosimilar Humira or adalimumab will act in the same manner, efficacy, dosing, side effect profile, immunogenicity, et cetera, as the reference product would. Number two, when you think about bringing these assets to market, that has evolved tremendously over the past, even within the past 5 years. So the cost of bringing a biosimilar to the market back in 2009, when I started, was between $75 and $100 million on a significantly accelerated pathway, right? And we saw those costs creep up quite a bit. Some of the other companies, I've advised over 75 biosimilar companies internationally in previous capacities, and we've seen those costs creep up quite a bit to $300-400 million, primarily because companies were trying to be more competitive, bringing in larger patient volumes, multiple indications. And I think the work that Dr. Niazi has done is pushing the FDA to go backwards a little bit and say, don't drive up the cost of R&D, the timeline of R&D to bring these biosimilars to the market, when we know that there's clinical programs that can be designed to ensure safety, efficacy, and biosimilarity without the extensive time commitment and cost involvement. So I think we're going to see cost of biosimilar research drop significantly from back to where it was originally. And I'll let Dr. Niazi comment on whether he thinks he agrees with me or not. And we're going to see the time frame significantly reduced from where it is today even further. So a biosimilars company focused on bringing biosimilars to the market will have a tremendous advantage in cost and time of bringing these assets to the market, and with the assumption that when a biosimilar comes to market, pick any drug that's out there, Humira, Herceptin, Avastin, Remicade, that the assumption will be that using a biosimilar versus a reference product should yield the same results in any patient population where a practitioner would typically practice. So Dr. Niazi, anything I said that you would want to disagree with?
No, I think you did a good job. But let me just add one thing. When you mention that these are exactly same, there is another clause in the legislation which is called interchangeable. And I had the privilege of working with the US Congress, and we have a bill on the table to remove that clause from the legislation. Another one that I was very lucky to be part of it is that biological drugs do not show any toxic response in animals. But for whatever reason, this was listed in the original legislation, quote unquote, animal toxicology. So I worked with several senators. We got the bill, and it was signed off in the first week of January, no more animal toxicology. And I think it is the stepwise changes we're bringing. Okay, the next step is to remove interchangeability. And our goal is to remove all testing in patients. You can test all you want in healthy subjects, but patient testing is not as sensitive as all other testings are. So we hope to demonstrate. I have received all of my biosimilars with no clinical trial in patients. I simply refused it. I said it doesn't make any sense. But I think a lot of companies, like Nick was saying, do it for marketing purpose. And I think we are pushing the the limits to regulatory. And we are totally confident that we'll be able to get through with least possible cost.
Arthur, let me give you some numbers around that, if you don't mind. So the average cost of a biosimilar, this is a McKinsey statistic that came out Q4 of 2022, so it's very recent. The average biosimilar can cost around 300 million to bring to market. 28% of that, so around 80 million, goes into these clinical trials. I mean, that's a huge number.
Big number.
It's
Yeah.
a very large number. So, we're very fortunate to work with Dr. Niazi because he has really, like he says, pushed the envelope from a legislation and regulatory standpoint to say no animal toxicology, pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, shorten the timeline, shorten our capital spend on that, which does not compromise safety, tolerability, efficacy. So that's why we really feel strong about where we enter the marketplace and that we could do this cheaper, faster, quicker, and get these truly into the hands of patients. Nick had spoken about Humira. I just want to give you guys a statistic on Humira. I mean, that can dose, if you go on like GoodRx, about $25,000 a shot. I mean, we have to do better. And this is in the USA. I'm not even talking about a global span. These drugs are extremely expensive. They treat extremely expensive diseases. And they're difficult to make. I mean, there's very few companies in the world that can make these biologics, as Afshin had said, right? It's extremely tedious. It's like building components to like a super jet, right? We're not building a bicycle or a car.
Now, let me add one more thing to this, Arthur, if I may. I see a couple of the questions that are coming on around AI and, good luck with FDA and some of the comments here. I think this is very important. First of all, guys, I want to make sure we have the background information. With biosimilar, there is absolutely no discovery. These are drugs that have been used safely for a long period of time by people, and then it's coming off the patent. So let's make sure that we understand. We're not coming up. We're not spending the investors' money. We're not spending our time to come up with the new drug entity. So we know exactly what drug we're going to be working with. The second thing here is that in terms of the development, these are drugs that Dr. Niazi has already put in the market. We know how to actually do step 1, 2, 3 to develop them. Develop meaning that manufacture them. So this is, again, no just, trying to say, try this method and that method. No, we know how to put a building together because it's a building that we have built before. Except we're going to do it faster and cheaper because we have done it before. The third thing here is that we're not going to go ahead and run all these clinical trials for different indication and just see which might work, pressure stratification, this and that. This is, again, we know which clinical indication we're going to go after because it's already been done with the same drug, right? We're a biosimilar, generic form of the biological. And so we know, again, what the expectation is from, by FDA. And again, Dr. Niazi is the person that has actually come up and put the rules and regulations for FDA and many of the other agencies. So I want to make sure, again, everybody's clear that we have built these buildings before. We're going to rebuild them faster, cheaper, and we're going to be able to make it affordable for the people out there. I hope that provides a little more clarity. The only thing is that the 3 products that we're working on, the market value by 2025 is $20 billion. So there is a huge market out there for what we're doing. I hope that provides a little clarity.
Yeah, and I want to pass it back to Niazi, but let me just give you guys some stats around that. The U.S. impact of brand loss exclusivity. So this is from 2017 to 2026. So it's right here. It's 45 billion in sales. That's only in the USA. So these are extremely, extremely large numbers when the whole biologics market is $211 billion. I mean, some of these drugs, Humira, for example, does 20 billion a year in annual sales. So Dr. Niazi, do you want to go ahead and pick up? Because I saw some questions in the chat. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I think Dr. Campbell, you're asking some very nice questions. So let me just share with you what is the motive behind it. So patients, when you have, let's say there's a cancer patient, okay, it's almost impossible to get a naive patient. They have gone through many medications and background. So the clinical response that they get, okay, is very wide. And on a very simple, what I did was I published a paper where I showed that simple calculation to get enough subjects to show that there is a difference, it will take 10 to 100 times more than what it takes to do the testing of a product against placebo control. So it is nothing to do with, yes, there will be different responses, but we will never be able to detect them. And the probability of a study failing is almost zero. So there really is no reason to do the trials unless we're just doing it for the sake of, as a checklist of it. And I think this is the argument which goes there. Okay, I'm not against testing in patients if that's what it takes, but if the testing in patients, so far, if in clinical trial, there were 180 trials listed. Okay. None of them failed. And the reason is because they cannot fail. So I think the argument goes that why you do the testing which can never fail. Okay. And that has to do with the statistics and nothing to do with, whether it's a patient or a healthy subject.
And one other thing to add to that, Arthur, the previous company that I started with 3 individuals and now had, before I sold, had over 1,000 employees with labs in 3 continents. We were testing actually immunogenicity, this anti-drug testing. For 40% of all the immunogenicity done in the entire US for all the biological drugs came to my lab. That's what we were doing. And we're talking about 800 programs annually, right? And kept adding. Top 300 pharma, biotech worldwide in 27 countries. We were doing testing. And I can tell you many, many biosimilars. So what Dr. Niazi has done here to basically really look at this, all this data that has been generated for decades, and then make an argument and now say, guys, there is no relationship with this animal data that you're generating with human data. Stop killing the animals. That's number one. Kudos for that. That's not. The second thing is, again, why are we, again, applying the traditional phase 1 and phase 3 clinical trial that are so costly, time consuming? For new biologics, absolutely, we got to do that. But for these biosimilars that we generate so much quality data that's already been provided, and the data that we generate using very, very sensitive and precise analytical technique in the laboratory to show the 2 molecules are the same. And then you don't need to design these phase 1, phase 3s with just this massive number of people. And I think this again, not I think, it's already been accepted in this arena. And Dr. Niazi has already got drugs or biosimilars in the market using this system. So I want to make sure, again, the audience is clear. This is not something that we're inventing right now under novel or we're doing it for the first time. No, we're a development commercialization company, and we're going to be going full speed with these 3 products to start with. And again, Keara can tell you more about our product and hopefully add more products into the pipeline.
Yeah, I just want to add, sorry, Arthur, that in America, not Europe, because we lag behind Europe, there's only 40 approved US biosimilars with 27 launched. That's it in the USA. There's over 70 in Europe. So if you have one of these, expensive diseases, autoimmune issue, hers too, right? Breast cancer, you only have access to, less than 50 of these. It's astonishing.
So what, I don't need to know the company, but what industry benefits financially from testing that is arguably not necessary because the drug has been in the marketplace for so long, and that they're imposing legacy thinking to a drug that's been in the market so long for a biosimilar? What industry is benefiting financially from that? And before you answer, how big is their lobby?
Yeah, so that's twofold. I'll chime in. I'll let Nick chime in, Dr. Niazi. Family Office audience, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn because we do post a lot of information on our LinkedIn with regards to this. And in full transparency, we have all come from big pharma. And again, Afshin's last company, that's exited for 3.8 billion is a CRO that does all the clinical trials globally. So I want to make sure everybody understands where we're coming from as we answer these questions. First and foremost, it's legacy way of thinking. The originator companies, Amgen, for example, in 9 months did 2 billion in sales on 3 biosimilar products, huge. They're too big to switch, right? They're too big to take this radical approach, go to the shareholders, hey, guess what? We're not doing phase 2. We're switching our phase 3 clinical trial. That's number one. Nick, I know in regards to time, you want to jump in as well. So go for it and then tag team.
Yeah. That's right. Look, I think to answer your question, Arthur, there's a lot of people that benefit in bringing, first of all, the general public benefits by bringing innovative biologic drugs to the market, right? For immunologic and oncologic purposes. However, there's a time frame by which that the manufacturer, and I'm a capitalist at heart, right? But there's a time frame by which the pharma and biotech companies have an opportunity to regain the investments that they make. You reach a point where for the benefit of society and to bring new innovation to the market, you have to bring lower cost drugs to the market. It has to happen that way. And so I'm answering your question. Payers benefit, PBMs benefit, pharma biotech companies benefit, CROs benefit. But in the end of the day, I think the FDA, and this goes back to one of Dr. Campbell's questions, the FDA is realizing that the way the system has worked today cannot continue to operate in the future. Costs are getting too high. People don't have access to drugs globally. And so we are seeing a move away from companies, big biopharma companies that have innovative drugs, like the Humiras of the world and the Avastins and the Herceptins that bring great benefit. There's a time frame by which you cannot continue to evergreen a drug to keep it on the market for an extended period of time. So the FDA realizes that, the VA recognizes that, the large payers recognize that. And that is why now is the opportunity for biosimilars to create real advantage, because people have woken up, even the federal government has woken up, the FDA has woken up, where the realization that alternatives have to be created. And fortunately, biosimilars are one of those benefits. So that's how I would answer your question. A lot of parties benefit, but there's a lot of parties that also realize that those benefits have to cease in order to create continued innovation.
Yeah, I was kind of pointing out the obvious, that the lobbies are powerful, and this is you're going to find out real quick. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it's probably similar to the pushback that people experience, that firms experience with the FDA in doing fast track drugs. The FDA doesn't want to do that because it doesn't fit within the scope of what their mandate is. And so if you're a pharma company and you want to go to a fast track drug, they just say, they shut you down, right? Because it doesn't fit within the scope of their process. And so I'm just wondering, the progress that you've made, will that accelerate when people finally realize that this is going to be benefiting the payers, the patients, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I'll answer real quick. I'm going to go back in 2009, 2010. There was a drug that was a biosimilar. It's not called a biosimilar because it was before the biosimilar pathway. It was the first one brought to the market in the US. It was growth hormone drug. Here's a fact, because I was directly involved in the negotiation of this contract. In order to get that drug, that biosimilar drug, on payers' preferred status, we had to raise the price of the biosimilar 70%. The reason we had to do that was because the PBMs got rebates off of the sales of more expensive drugs, which were innovator reference product drugs. We had to raise our price just in order to get a biosimilar, which should be cheaper on the market. That compounded by the fact that, to your point, Arthur, today, policy and lobbying has changed. The realization that there's orphan and cell and gene therapy drugs on the market in excess of $1 million, someone has to pay for them. There's a lot of changes in policy and regulatory, much shaped by Dr. Niazi, that have influenced the trend towards biosimilars and away from reference product once the reference product has been on the market for a period of time. So I'm not really worried today about the policy, the payers, and the regulatory, because I think those pathways are making great advancements and understanding the benefits of biosimilars. I think for me, it's consistent education and bringing the right biosimilars to the market, right? So if you're going to bring a biosimilar to the market, it's got to be with an asset that's going to make a big enough difference and impact, a big enough financial impact on the market in order to create value. Dr. Niazi, I don't know if you would disagree or agree.
No, I think I agree with you, but I want to add three things. Okay, Keara mentioned 40 or 42 biosimilars, but they represent only 12 molecules out of 220 that I have identified. So if you talk about the market expansion, it's almost exponential. Okay. Second thing is, I think FDA has refused to review a lot of clinical data submitted by many biosimilar companies. It was not necessary. There was a mindset that you need to have a published data to go to clinicians, which is how they sell it to through the physicians. Okay. That mindset has not changed. So the big pharma still wants to do extensive trials, and these are not, most of them are not necessary. And I published my papers to show that. Okay. The third thing, which is I think is probably just as important, okay, is that we have a history to look at. Back in the 80s, when generics came, trust me, the story was same. The first thing that came out was, no, these drugs gonna kill everybody. Then it went through. So my perspective is that over time, when all these misconceptions are gone, okay, we will be able to bring the prices down significantly and not having to worry about $100 million for going into clinical trials or testing, which is totally unnecessary. Thank
Let
you.
me add one more thing to this. We talked quite a bit about the speed as well as pricing, right? The cost to do this. When Dr. Niazi reached out to me and about 2 years ago, we chatted. He said, you know what? I know what not to do now. And that was really an interesting conversation, Dr.
Yes,
Niazi,
yes.
on the phone. And he said, you know what? I raised $500 million and in my previous company, and we built this Taj Mahal of a manufacturing. Great. But the cost of the manufacturing. And then you got to wait several years for FDA to get it approved and all that, right? So picture this, the big pharmas, they got their commercialization, their manufacturing, everything else. They put the product in a pipeline, but the reality, all these departments are protecting their own turf. That no, we gotta do an animal study. Oh no, we gotta do phase 1 this way, and they take the most conservative approach just because they want absolutely not in any way, form or shape to get dinged because they want to get their bonuses. So let's be pretty frank about this.
They want to keep their job and
yeah, and you know who pays for that?
Yeah.
The investors will pay for that.
Yeah.
And eventually,
it's really just a travesty of justice. It really is. And so many people don't have access to these life-saving drugs, and that's the reason.
By the way, that's Jack, one of the other amazing advisors that we have, and I will shortly let you actually introduce yourself, Jack. But let me go with this. So look at it this way, and then you get into the hands of the people that do commercialization in these big pharmas. We have streamlined everything. The funding that is coming to the company is going to go into 3 areas. It is manufacturing. We actually have amazing CDMO contract manufacturing that we're working with. And if we win, they're going to win. And if they win, because they get royalty. That's one. Then it comes into clinical trial. There's nobody better than Dr. Niazi that, again, has already set the pathway for the clinical, and he can take care of it. From a bioanalytical perspective to doing the immunogenicity, anti-drug antibody, pharmacokinetic, I've done that for 20 years of my life. So down to the person, the analyst that will be doing those testings, we already know who's going to be doing all those testing. We're not going to leave anything but for chance. Then the third thing, that's when Keara comes in and Nick comes in. The reality is we're going to go into commercialization, and the commercialization is going to be outsourced and we're not going to build a commercialization team. So I want to make sure, Arthur, the audience understand that this is this system that we have put in place, this whatever you want to call it, process, has been done for generic for years, and it's working. Now
Yep.
we're doing this for biosimilars. With that, Jack, if you want to introduce yourself quickly, please.
Yeah, well, so I'm an internist and cardiologist. I was the CEO of the American College of Cardiology, and then came up here to do research at the Columbia Cardiovascular Research Foundation, where I'm president and CEO. But I've had an eclectic career in medicine, and I've really kind of, I also am chairman of the National Coalition on Healthcare in Washington, foolishly trying to advise Congress on smart policy. But,
Yes.
so basically though, I think this is such an exciting company because it is going to bring more value and really to patients, not just here, but worldwide. These drugs are not available, and they're essential life-saving drugs. They make all the difference in cancer and autoimmune disease and so forth. And we really need to make them available and affordable for people. And that's what we're about.
Thank you, Jack. And I just want to add, I mean, I'm sure everyone can see above my head the name novel 351K. So in closing, Arthur, you had originally asked me where the name comes from. 351K is the regulatory pathway set by the FDA for biosimilars. So 351A is the originator, 351K is the biosimilar. And so we have a novel company to get through regulatory, which then helps us get these in the hands of patients faster and at a reasonable price.
Thank you, Keara. Is the awareness strong enough at this point so the incumbent big pharma companies can't push back so hard on what you're doing that they kind of have to fold their tent and say, listen, we have to let this happen?
There's a lot coming down the pipeline from the larger companies, which also are the originators, which also have their own biosimilar, AbbVie, Amgen, right? I mean, they all, so, you can look at that for what it is, and you could look at the price points.
Right.
We really feel strongly that we could potentially have partnerships with some of these companies that would aid in scalability and portfolio strategy. But it's going to come down to dollars and cents. And really our mission is to get these drugs to market quicker, faster, and then allow it to be accessible for patients, not just in the US, but from a global footprint. Right. And it's a moving target.
Right. Yeah. If big pharma wakes up to how big the market is, then they can also awaken to the fact that the price point can come down.
I mean, we're on the same panels. I'm at JP Morgan Healthcare Conference with the CEOs of AbbVie, Amgen, Genentech, Coherus, roundtables. We try to fly a little bit under the radar because we're disruptive, right? I mean, it's really this virtual asset light biotech company that's reshaping the landscape. So we need to be mindful of having, these targets on our back while we fight the good fight.
Yeah. This is way over my skis on how all this works. We just know how powerful big pharma is. So that's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
And
we all come from big pharma. I mean, we all still in some capacity advise, consult. We do appreciate, right, the magnitude and the breadth and reach that they have to patients. And look, the positive is big pharma and with the relationship of biotech, right? Because biotech fuels a lot of the innovation for pharmaceuticals. They've done a great job on the educational standpoint of educating patients on what a biological is, what a biosimilar is. Because at the end of the day, it's an insurance play and it's a pharmacy benefit management play. It's not left up to the cardiologist, oncologist, et cetera, et cetera. So I think big pharma has done, a good job of that awareness with patient-centric dialogue, but it goes back to revenue, right? And making profits. And
Medicare is such a big payer, right? They must want this on some.
Yeah, you have Medicare Part D, then you have Medicare Part B. So, I mean, I know for the sake of time right now on here, we don't have to get super involved in that. I will say 2 of our products are oncology products. One of our other products in development is on the autoimmune. So we are very aware of Medicare Part D and B.
Just to remind everybody, we have in a few days, we're going to be getting into the weeds on the financials and so on and so forth and the investment opportunity, but feel free to reach out when we connect everybody to talk even more in depth about that offline. This is a personal question. If I were invested in a company like Royalty Pharma, who buys.
Do you ever feel like you're too old to reach your fitness goals you have for yourself? That's some nonsense. Let me show you how to transform your body and become stronger than you ever thought possible.
Pretty much that's not me, but I've done that
How
before.
old you are. In this video today, I'm going to show you how I got in control of my body.
Okay, let's see. All right. I think we're Arthur, I thought maybe we already got somebody angry. Usually it's after the second date people hang up on us.
So
Arthur, Royalty Pharma, I mean, great company, great model. I think just because of the current economic situation, dry powder, right? What's going on with pricing down rounds and companies looking for capital. If you have an existing royalty payment plan and you need to free up capital, whether it's a debt instrument or you're going for full equity, they have a fit in the marketplace. But there's no conflict of interest with our company, if that's where you're.
Yeah, the reason I ask is he's a friend. I'm an investor.
Yep.
Been printing money, and so the personal part of it is that I want him to continue to prosper, right? That's all. But maybe not.
Yeah. Arthur, one thing that you brought up again, since we're talking about almost investment and potentially, how this company, ours work. Look, the traditional biotech that they have to go start from discovery, right? And come up with a new drug. You put in the investors I've invested in 40 of them from scratch, by the way. Some of them going to go belly up, some may be successful. The bottom line is you keep pouring more and more money into them because that discovery stage, it is really difficult. And by the time you get into it, everyone trying to get to that phase 1. Is it safe after couple $100 million? Is it safe? And if it's not safe, you're done. If it's safe, then another 100 million. Is it efficacious, right?
Yeah.
So, and by the way, most of the investors, including myself, for those early stage companies, we always look for, a Pfizer and an Amgen comes and gobbles them up after, 8 years, 10 years,
Yeah.
right? But I want to make sure on the other side of investment spectrum, you got real estate, right? You go buy a house, you buy a piece of land, you get a 30%, 40% increase in value after whatever years you sell it, right? But it's going to be there. I want to make sure you understand our company. It really resembles what I did with my previous company. When I had a contract research manufacturing, it was fee for service, right? In essence, that money went into the company to build it, but then it was generating revenue after a very short time, right? In this company, the way we have done our numbers. By the way, we're not going to go into weeds of it, but at any time, any of the potential investors or family offices want to talk to us, we will show you our model. We have taken the most conservative approach to say that if we capture only 5% of the biosimilar market of these 3 biosimilars, right? That in about 4 years, we're going to be cash positive. And again, once we look at our EBITDA is going to be in the order of $100 million plus, $200 million plus, and moving up. So this is not one of those companies that you put money in, it goes to research, sometime in the next 10 years, let's see where it goes. No, we're going to be generating revenue and EBITDA. And this is not even include the discussion we're having with the African countries, with the Middle Eastern countries, with South American countries, and if we go beyond 5% of the market in the US. So I'm actually very excited and eager to see if anybody wants to talk to us, go into more detail. And Keara, and actually, as we're talking about this, can I just have the Vice President of Finance and our CFO also, can you turn on your camera for just a minute? I want to introduce you guys to 2 other people here. I do the introduction, guys, to keep it short. Chuck Miller is our CFO. Chuck has been involved with me, 4 or 5 companies now previously. So Chuck is just incredible, so all kinds of modelings. He can get in touch with you and walk you through that. Monty Coleman is our Vice President of Finance. Monty and I, we've known each other for about, 15, 16 years. The last company that we exited big at over $3 billion. We started when Monty and I, we were basically, there were 4 people in a company. And Monty was a fractional vice president. And we took that company with $250,000 of credit cards to over $3 billion. So Monty has been with me for about 15 years, and now she's also part of Novel. So kudos to both of them. So you guys can go back to your finance stuff. Thank you.
Thanks.
Back to you, Arthur.
Yeah. So this has been super helpful, guys. It's even more fascinating to me now, having heard getting into the weeds a little bit on the story, and super appreciate you guys being on and having you all here. And Keara, thanks, many thanks again for doing this. Forgive me, I don't know the date, but we'll make sure everybody has it. But in less than
I
a
believe
week.
it's May 2nd.
Okay, May 2nd. Thank you. We're going to be having the group back on and get further into the weeds about the financial opportunity, and excited to do that. Thank you all so much for doing
Thank
this.
you
Super
very much.
interesting. Yeah.
No,
Thank you very
And,
much, Arthur.
You're very welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
And so to the group, we'll put everybody in touch. And as I always say, thank you for sharing with us the only thing you can't make more of, and that's your time. Till next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye.
Great
you.
afternoon.
All the
Thank
very
you.
called in. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Excellent.